All right, I seem to have taken the session chair position back, but we're going to have Ulf Hermann exposing data to QML, which is a good thing. Here you go.
Yeah, hello. So I'm Ulf Hermann. I'm the QML guy. I've been for a while now. Making things happen on QML, like compiling to C++ sometimes, and like adding things that nobody expects sometimes, and most of the time fixing bugs that annoy you sometimes. And today I'm going to give a little overview of what you need to do if you want to have a quick view with data that displays data and what options you have and what new developments there are that you can make use of. And in particular, I'm going to talk a bit about the model view delegate pattern that we probably all know, but it's always good to have that as a refresher. And then I'm going to talk about why we added required properties and how we improved them over time. And then I'm going to talk about like how you make your models actually editable through your views. And there are a couple of things that we've added there too. I'm going to touch on QRange model and SortFilterProxyModel, but those are more like things that are not really there yet. I mean, QRange model is there in C++, but not quite in QML. And that leads me to where we need to go in the future. So the model view delegate pattern. Actually, that's one thing that sets QML apart a bit. Other languages do it differently. So how do we do that? We have usually many pieces of data you want to show on your screen, and those are organized in a view, and they come from a model. The model only holds data, and the view usually doesn't display the stuff itself. If you think of list view or grid view and stuff like that. No, it uses a delegate. It uses little pieces of view code that it arranges, and the view itself only does the arrangement, and the actual display of the data items is delegated to delegates. So that makes for nice reusability of models and views and delegates, and it leads to nice separation of concerns. So if you look at this little piece of code here, you have a list view, and I put a list model in there because it's the easiest thing to do. It's not necessarily because you should do that. And I've added a little delegate that gets this model object. That's a bit magic, this model object, but everybody seems to know it. And that's the old way to do it. Nowadays you would do it differently, but this is like the classic way to do it. And a model object has properties according to the elements of the model, and you can edit those properties. Like if you click on this mouse area, then the value of the greeting is increased. And then it says, hello. So how can we improve that? Does anybody have an idea? Yeah, but before we had required properties. Yeah, okay. There are many ways to improve this. But first, like, why do we do that? Yeah, because separation of concerns, of course. So we can have multiple models, multiple delegates, and multiple views, and they all play nicely together. As long as you do it right. Which is, you need to use the same names for all your models and delegates. Otherwise, back in the days, this would just fail. I mean, it still only fails if you do that. It displays some emoji bake instead of the text that you expect. And it doesn't really update anything if you click the mouse area. That's too bad, because you use the model that has fruit and quality instead of greeting and value. And so we were thinking like, okay, what can we do about that? That's like not really what we want to happen, especially because it's silent. And there's not really all that much we can do, in fact, because you can switch out the models at runtime, right? Like, how can we know in advance what you're gonna do? You can switch out the delegates at runtime. How can we know in advance like what your next delegate that you've loaded from somewhere will have? Well, we can do a bit. We can make it fail noisily instead of silently. And that's what the required properties are about. So nowadays, you declare required properties. And if the required properties don't match what the model expects, the required properties of a delegate, then the view will not instantiate the delegate in the first place. It will instead give you an error. And that's nicer than instantiating the wrong delegate, and you will see it immediately. Okay, this was wrong. Too bad. And that again helps with, makes it more robust. And since you can see the required properties in the code now directly, you have to write actually required, and it's visible on first sight because it has to be in the top level object. That also helps your separation of concerns. But we forgot something. Anybody know what we forgot? Yeah, what happens if I put the mouse area there?
Yeah, if you increase the value, it doesn't do anything. It just increases the log all.
Yes, that's what we unfortunately forgot when we invented required properties. You can't really edit it like that. Because what happens there is if you write to our nice value property of the delegate, it does not actually change the model. No. What it does is it breaks the binding. It breaks the binding from the model to the delegate. So now you have a local value property that you can increment that as much as you like with your mouse area. But if the model changes, you don't get updates. So if somebody else writes to the model and says the value is now 97, you'll find mouse area here will not see that. And those two values are now completely decoupled. So that's kind of a bummer, right? And we noticed eventually.
One question, can you do model not value?
You can, of course, yes. But we don't really want that because that goes against the spirit of required properties. So we actually wanted a real solution there. And finally, we have one in 6.10. And the solution looks like this. You can now say to the view, okay, I actually want my required properties to work both ways. So that the delegate is updated from the model, and also the model is updated from the delegate. And this works because we've invented sticky bindings that are used internally there between the delegate and the model object. And when you write the model, the bindings one binding is triggered, and when you write the delegate, the other binding is triggered, and neither of them breaks the other one. How nice. And like just on Friday, I managed to actually also make it debounce. So if you write the delegate, the change doesn't propagate back to the delegate, and if you write the model, the change also doesn't propagate back to the model. So this is in 6.10, and you need to get this opt-in there, delegate model access, because it's obviously a change in behavior, and we can't just do that silently. But we've managed to put it into all views that we have in Qt, so repeater and instantiator and list view and grid view and table view and tree view and the various things in positioning and cute, quick 3D and so on. So that's fixed. Yay.
But it probably only works with list model and abstracts.
No, it works with all models.
Not if it's a JSON.
Also,
It's a structure that you can use as model for a list.
yeah, but internally you can still, of course, update them. Yes, that we are getting to the other problem with those because it internally updates the structure, but it does not propagate the data out again. So you update the model, but there are now two models. But let's continue. So first of all, I have another section in between that. I'll get back to that, yeah? First of all, this also works for the short form required, as you'd expect. Like you can make an existing property required by just declaring it required like that, and it does the right thing. And why do I say that? Because what if your find spin box there is not actually the top level element of the delegate? Then you have kind of that's kind of a bummer, right? You want like the spin box's value to be updated from the model, and from the model via the required property, and you also want the spin box, if it's triggered by the user, or if the user clicks on something, to update the required property and thereby the model. But what happens if you have like one binding from the required properties to the spin box value and one binding from the spin box value to the required property? And that thing has a name in QML. Who knows? Yes, it's a binding loop. It's not so great because binding loops are generally kind of an unpredictable thing. If the QML engine detects that, it will break it, and then something gets stuck somewhere. So, but basically we know this problem. It has been around for a long time. And there is a solution for it. And the solution is just implemented in C++. So basically that's what we do for all our controls in quick controls, basically. Basically, the user interaction is hidden behind the curtains, and it updates the value property without QML being directly involved. And that uses an interesting feature of QML. If you like change a property in C++ and it sends its change signal, that does not break any bindings on this property. Only if you change the property from QML and QML sees it being changed, then it does break bindings. So now you can actually bind your spin box's value to the required property, and you can use a change handler to write the required property again, and that works. But if I was just going to say on value changed there, notice it is on value modified, but if I was just going to say on value changed, I'd have a nice binding loop again, because every time the model changes something, it would bounce back to the required property. And every time the user changed something, it would also bounce back to the spin box. So, in quick controls, we invented another nice thing, and it is signals that are only sent on user interaction, not on every value change. And that is what this value modified is. That is only sent when the user clicks on something. Now it works, because if the user clicks on something, then the change is not coming from the model, and so we can write it back, and it bounces back, but then it's the same, and it's fine. And if the change comes from the model, then we don't get the signal, and so we don't bounce it back. In practice, this works. But it's, of course, less than ideal, because if you want to do that, you need to understand all this whole stuff, and write it in C++. And there's no way to do this in QML. And you need two separate pieces here, a binding and a change handler to make that happen. And whenever you have two things that need to work in tandem in a very specific way, you have a good chance of messing it up. So I was like, yeah, okay, that's also not really all that ideal. Maybe we can make that better. And incidentally, there were a lot of requests from people looking for two-way bindings. And I was like, yeah, well, what is a two-way binding? Like, it gets like a contradiction in itself in QML, right? So, but we have kind of two-way bindings already for our required properties right back to the model, etc. And so let's see what we can do there. Maybe we can kind of use the same mechanism here. And, oops. No, I messed it up. Oh, interesting. Come on. What is it? P? No. No, that's audio muted. Shift P. Control Shift P. Yeah. Ah, there we go. Yeah. And the solution is a synchronizer. That's also new in 6.10. And notice you only need one construct here, and it will synchronize two or more properties and their values, and it will do our nice JavaScript coercion if they are of different types, and it will debounce them automatically, and it is also a Christmas tree. But we're not quite done with it yet, because one thing it cannot do is it cannot synchronize asynchronous properties. So it expects the change signal, new change property, to come back right away, and the property to assume the new value right away. But I've been told this is not always the case, and so apparently it needs more features. Those are not in 6.10, and that's why it is in tech preview in 6.10. You have to import Qt Labs synchronizer to make it work. But yeah, there's only one thing here, one synchronizer, and each side of the synchronizer is one property. There are about 50 different ways to set this up, either with on or with aliases, or with target and property. And those all work nicely together. And there are some options on like how to determine which one is the initial value, like in which direction the first synchronization takes place. Basically, if you call it source, the alias, then that's where it takes the first synchronization from. If you call it target, then that's where it sends the first synchronization to. If you call it something else, then it does no initial synchronization, it waits for some signal. And yeah, this is all nice and documented, and you can go crazy with it and try what it does. Yay. But that's not all. Not all that there is about this. We've been shortly touching on this before. If you have an abstract item model, like, for example, a list model, and you edit it via a delegate, then that works nice and well. And for example, this text in the header here gets updated when you change the model via the spin box there. If you twiddle the spin box of the first hello thingy, then the header gets updated, right? Nice. But if you just paste in some data into the model, which you can do, and then you twiddle the spin box, then unfortunately, no, your header does not get updated. it stays at its old value. And yeah, that's kind of a bummer. What happens there is the view ingests your model data and internally has some adapters that eat your model data and keep internally something that kind of sort of looks like an abstract item model. And that thing gets updated when you twiddle the spin box. So if you were like having another, yeah, okay, that's pretty hard to do that. It's factually as if your delegate owned that. And so that's kind of unsatisfactory. I was like, yeah, that's, those views are in fact black holes for anything that's not an abstract item model or not a list of QObject also is fine because QObjects have their own identities, but anything that's kind of value sticking in there, it's swallowed whole. So I was thinking like maybe we can use QRange model to fix that, and this is like for now I'm getting into the future work section because I just noticed this last week. And I was like, damn, I would really love to use this new opt-in mechanism there for fixing that, but it's now getting really tight for 6.10. And so we might need another opt-in mechanism for that, which would be kind of a bummer. Reminds us of the required property problem, but yeah, too bad. So I was like, yeah, maybe we can use QRange model for that, which is also new in 6.10 and does exactly that. You can stick in any kind of weirdo container into QRange model, and it can actually modify it in place and propagate the changes back to the original container. Ain't it nice? But we don't really have a QML integration for that. I mean, I've been, oh, where is it? Oh, this is the old one. I've updated the slides. Well, okay. I've been hacking about it. I mean, the slide after that was it isn't pretty. So maybe yeah, you can download the slides from the website and see the not pretty parts if you like, but they are really not pretty. And then we also have SortFilterProxyModel, and that does what it's supposed to do, which is a totally different story. Has been requested a lot. You can sort and filter your models with it, and it has a QML integration now with an interesting API. Luckily, it's in tech preview, so we can just rip it all out and do it again. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to finish SortFilterProxyModel. And what I also want to do in the future is to have some kind of shorthand syntax for Synchronizer, like some spaceship operator or something like that that says, okay, just like those two properties, make them the same, not Synchronizer element, but aliases, etc. So let's see if I can find something nice there. Same thing for actually making those sticky bindings that I've invented for required properties accessible to users. Would also be nice. And yeah, then the most urgent thing is actually what to do with this whole QRange model and propagating changes back out of views thingy. Ah, yeah, and then indeed, if you have asynchronous properties that take some time to actually react, what should Synchronizer do with those? Yeah. 10 minutes for questions, I guess.
So I guess we did have some trouble updating the model versus updating the slides.
Yeah.
Assuming the microphone keeps working, doesn't sound positive, we can take questions for 10 minutes and then go to coffee.
Oh, I noticed. There's another slide missing that I just added in yesterday. We have some standard delegates, of course. If you just want a table view or a tree view that works like a table view or a tree view, you don't have to do any of this. It's called table view delegate, and the other one's called tree view delegate, and you're done.
And they say naming is hard. Okay, questions in the room. I see Arjen back there, if you'll...
With regards to required properties, have you given any thought on how to deal with required properties that are reserved names in QML, like, say, ID?
Yeah, that's another thing. We have been talking about some kind of syntax feature that renames required properties, like required properties ID as foobar or something like that. Yeah, that's also somewhere on the roadmap. Okay. For now, you have to use model data for that or something like that. Yeah.
Sometimes I want to do an alias that's also required. I guess the synchronizer kind of helps me with that, or is that like something you have in mind? Like I want to do like required alias property, right? To like just expose something from the inside to the outside.
Alias is of course capable of doing something similar. B, you can do the alias the other way around. You can declare the required properties outside and then alias it to the inside. And C, yes, required alias is also something I would like to have.
Okay, first, as a question, just to be sure, so Synchronizer will not be tied to explicitly item models, but I could use it anywhere else where I want some. Okay.
Yes. Synchronizer is just a mechanism to synchronize multiple properties. It's particularly handy for that case, but you can also use it for anything else.
Mm-hmm. Second, it's more like a comment. No, for SortFilterProxyModel, since a couple of years in KDE, since we needed that a lot, we did our own binding, and we had our difficulties on mapping the thing to be QML friendly. But is there, maybe you want to take a look just in case there could be some idea that could be recycled? I don't know.
I believe the people who wrote our SortFilterProxyModel QML implementation have already looked at yours.
Oh, okay. Good.
So maybe I'm not going to look at it.
Hi, Ulf. Thanks for working on that. Getting data from C++ to QML is, at least for me, often a pain point. Can you go to slide 8?
There we go.
Thank you. Okay, it's slide 7 on your non-updated version, I guess.
There we go.
All right. It doesn't update. It's just because in the below part we have not model.value, or is it also because of the syntax at the top in the header?
No, if you were writing model.value instead of just value in the mouse area, it would work. It would update.
Right, okay. So on the next slide, you have then the solution to introduce a new property, delegate model access, that fixes that.
Yeah, now you can do it without model dot.
All right, nice. But what happens if you forget about it?
If you just do it the old way around, if you just do model.value, it still works. Because, I mean, you have to require the model object then.
Yeah, I just mean, is there some way of, like, I do a review or I have some refactoring going on where I can then easily spot this with a junior developer, for example, to tell them, hey, you forgot this and that?
QML can help you sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, if you require the model object is untyped. The only thing you can require there is basically a QObject. And then QML, if you were writing model.value there, QML will complain that QObject has no property value. And that's where you can see this. And now you can actually make it typed. You can say, okay, delegate model access, read write, and require a property int value. And then QML will not complain if you increment that.
Okay, thanks.
We also have one question from the chat room. What is the use of target in Synchronizer?
So Synchronizer has multiple ways of specifying the properties to be synchronized. And one way is the same as in binding, for example, that you have a target, which is an object, and then a property, which is a string, and that has the those together then define one of the properties to be updated. And the upside of that is that you can change the target later. The target can have a binding, and you can have like a different target later on, or a different property. So it makes it more dynamic. Whereas aliases you can't change later.
Any more questions? All right. You just got in under the...
So for the read-write thing, you have that as a property of list view. Do you have the same for repeater and all that, those kinds of things?
Yes, available for all views shipped with Qt.
Right. But, I mean, technically, repeater isn't necessarily a view, so...
Yes, repeater is a view, and instantiator is also a view.
Okay.
Okay. Let's check the chat room again. All right. Thank you again, Ulf.